It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, I'm Gary McNamara. He is Eric Harley. He has the morning off because he's sick. 102.5 degree temperature is what he texted me yesterday, so we hope he's feeling okay and is back for tomorrow's show. I know he'll be antsy to do so. Whenever he's gone for a couple of days, he comes in, I'm like, just go for it for a while. I know how it is. We look forward to coming in every single day. It's like when you're sick for a couple of days, it's like coming in on a Monday. You've got so much in your brain ready to explode that if it's not allowed, you might explode. All right. I think everything is done here. My phone decided to update, a major update to my phone, my Android phone, here in the last hour or so, where it wanted everything. I use the phone during the show. I've got so many windows open on my computer, I can open more on my phone. And all of a sudden, I went to it about an hour and a half ago, and it's in the middle of this update, major update. I mean, I had to do everything. I had to put in a new password and everything. Completely major. That's the biggest update I've ever gotten on my phone. But all the little symbols and everything else look really cool. So, all right. But let me see. Okay, fingerprint works there. I got this thing secure. The NSA can't get in my phone. Yeah, I'm an idiot to believe that, right? How's everybody doing? Okay, the last part of last hour, I had to act like a little child because we were talking about the protest and what the leftists want. And they really can't articulate what they want except for the fact of, I want to be able to do nothing, and I want you to take care of me in every way possible. And if you won't take care of me, if I have to earn stuff in my life, and you don't take care of me, then this country completely and totally sucks. And so I did my child-like kind of, I don't want to. And I did go over to Alan and Ron, and I said, guys, was I irritating when I used that voice? They said, you were getting there, but you weren't yet. If you would have continued it, it would have been irritating. Well, I think that was sort of the entire point of it. But moving to other news, this is great stuff. The Supreme Court will hear arguments next month on Trump's bid to start enforcing his executive order that seeks to end automatic U.S. citizenship. That's a birthright citizenship. But the court is not formally assessing the constitutionality of Trump's attempt to eliminate the birthright citizenship. Rather, the court will consider a more technical issue, which is they've agreed to hold a special oral argument next week, May 15th, on the question of district judges' authority to issue nationwide injunctions. It is rare, again, it is rare for the court to schedule arguments on emergency appeals, and the move is a sign that the justices are taking the Trump administration's position seriously. If the high court agrees with Trump, the judges overstep their authority. It could allow the administration to begin immediately enforcing its citizenship policy in some parts of the country. But the bigger point is, because that will still be fought as you get to higher courts. That'll still be fought. That fight isn't over. But what it says is district judges cannot issue those nationwide injunctions. That's where I think they'll get to. The court's eventual ruling regarding nationwide injunctions, which is now expected in late May or in June. Man, they move this quickly. For the Supreme Court, this is very quick. It will have implications far beyond the birthright citizenship order. Nationwide injunctions have stopped a broad spectrum of Trump administration policies since the start of his second term. Trump's Justice Department has argued that the federal district judges should have the ability to block policies only in the geographic district where the judge is located or with regard to people or groups that sued. Years of experience have shown that the executive branch cannot properly perform its functions if any judge anywhere can enjoin every presidential action everywhere, the Trump administration wrote in its emergency appeal last month. They were talking about it on Fox News yesterday. Here's Molly Hemingway on all of this.
Well, it's hard to take people in good faith when they're talking about due process and rule of law, when they didn't care at all about due process and rule of law, when the border was completely open to bring in tens of millions of illegal immigrants over the past few decades, and nobody cared about this. That's why this nationwide injunction case before the Supreme Court is so important. You had an election. Donald Trump was very clear that he wanted to shut down the border and he wanted to deport people who were here illegally, and people voted for that. And now you have all of these rogue, lower-level judges who are frankly embarrassing the Supreme Court with these temporary injunctions, nationwide temporary restraining orders and nationwide injunctions, where they're saying, we don't care who won the election. We're going to pretend that Joe Biden is still president or that Kamala Harris won the presidency, and we're going to implement their immigration policies through these nationwide injunctions. I think the Supreme Court is saying, and it's, by the way, justices on both sides of the aisle. Elena Kagan has said you can't have a nationwide injunction where you can just wait out the presidency and have some partisan political judge decide what the policy is. So this is a real opportunity for the court, and I imagine they're going to take it and give some guidance to lower judges.
I agree with her completely. And this goes back to the entire thing. They tried to sell it, but I think during the Trump administration, it really lost a lot of impact. And this is where, well, no, you can never go against what a judge says, as if judges are on this higher plane. They're this higher plane. They hover above the rest of us. They have the robes. They're almost like deities. What they say can never be questioned. Hogwash. And it's about time, and it's Trump that's doing it. And if anybody should do it, because if anybody believes that he is a victim of rogue prosecutors and rogue judges, it's Trump. Look at the lawfare. But the Democrats still tried to play this whole entire thing but it's a judge. It's a judge. It's a judge. Now, Trump has already said, I'm going to obey what the Supreme Court says. But these other judges, they're rogue judges. And we're going to keep taking this, and we're going to defeat them. And I believe in the majority of the cases that he brings that will make it to the Supreme Court, they will. But I think what has happened is so outrageous that the Supreme Court, as Molly Hemingway said, is embarrassed by all of this. And when you say it, when Elena Kagan actually said, you can't have district judges stopping everything that the executive branch does. That's not the way that our system works. In their geographic location, they can make decisions, but hey, mostly they're about actually doing court functions, like cases and things like that. But anything that they do is their geographic area. They cannot, and you've seen this like crazy, and this is what the Democrats wanted. The Democrats figured this is all a part of when they accuse Trump of being a fascist. And I'm only using the F word because they use the F word. When they accuse Trump of being a fascist, it is they who are actually involved in the fascist narrative and promoting the fascism, well, what they believe is fascism. Because what they're saying is, we can't win at the ballot box, so these appointed judges will do our bidding for us. And that's why we wanted, during the Biden administration, to pack as many of them in, because it's not a conspiracy, it's a culture. And the culture of these activist judges is, I'm not really a judge, I'm an activist. You want the evidence? Look at the Wisconsin judge. Look at the New Mexico judge. Those aren't judges. Those are political activists that don't give a damn about the law and as officers of the court. They don't care. They didn't care. It's like we don't care. We're gonna do what we want to do. And so this is a great thing that Trump has done. And to get it to the Supreme Court this quickly, I believe it was April 17th, where they said we're going to have the oral arguments, which will be on May 15th next week, and then the decision done by May or early June. I mean, that is a 300-pound defensive lineman running a 4.2 40, which I don't think's ever happened in the history of the planet. To use a sports analogy there, that's extremely fast. So I do think that there's some embarrassment in the Supreme Court. Like, we've got to stop this. These judges are just completely and totally out of control. But this gets to the whole point that the Democrats were still trying to use. But these are judges. They're not a president or a politician. They're not the peons elected by the people. These are the appointed judges. They wear robes. These are the deities of the legal system. They are godlike. They hover above all of us. They make the rules and regulations that we must abide by. Really? I didn't know that's how the system went. I thought they were supposed to interpret the law and interpret the Constitution that comes through the people and their elected representatives. Well, I mean, just throwing out the constitutional stuff here. So, yeah, it's about time. And I think that what the Democrats forget is that everything blew up after the lawfare from Trump. I love it when Democrats, and I mentioned this last hour or the hour before, I just love it when Democrats still scream, 34 felonies, 34 felonies. How could somebody... Blah, 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 blah. Why do you think? The public, a significant portion of the public, the majority of the voting public looked at that and said, bogus. Activist prosecutors, rogue judges. Democrats think people are stupid. We can sell them that these people in robes rise above us all. They're not normal human beings, as I like to say, the deities of law, the deities of justice. Hogwash. So it will be interesting. I can't wait for the oral arguments next week. That may be a time where I have to put on the headphones and actually listen to all of the arguments on that, because I just wonder, I just want to hear the judges going after these lawyers that are saying no, these activist judges, should be able to put through nationwide injunctions, because I believe there's going to be some major pushback. It could be fun to listen to all of this. 866-90-RED-I.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Heading of this year's winter wheat crop continues to move farther north as the year progresses and moves at an above-average pace. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey with the national winter wheat heading progress numbers as of May 4th.
39% of this 2025 U.S. winter wheat crop headed by May 4th. That's 6 points ahead of the five-year average, slightly behind last year's pace of 41%.
California leads all states with 83% of its winter wheat crop heading. Meanwhile,
this week, for the first time, we are seeing some heading moving pretty far to the north, all the way up into states like Ohio, where 7% of the crop is headed, up from 0% last week. Other states seeing their first heading progress include Oregon, 6% headed, and Washington State at 1%.
Winter wheat condition as of May 4th is at 51%. Very good to excellent. Up week over week and year over year. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric is out. He is under the weather. 102.5 temperature is what he told me yesterday, so we hope he is feeling much, much better very, very soon. As we all know here, the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, sent Harvard a letter yesterday. She was on Fox Business with Larry Kudlow talking about the letter that she sent.
And President Trump is not backing down DEI or anti-Semitism. What can you tell us about this story?
Well, he clearly is not. We've frozen about $2.2 billion at this particular point of grants to Harvard through HHS funding. We've just made it abundantly clear until they can come on board and fight anti-Semitism, obey the laws that the Supreme Court have put in place about the kind of admissions policies they should have, stop driving Jewish students, almost underground with their anti-Semitism and just many more things. And we've talked to them. Their answer to us was filing a lawsuit on freedom of speech. And I have said that is not the issue. It's a civil rights issue on campus relative to the anti-Semitism. And they've just said that we're trying to dictate to them how they should run their university, which is clearly not the case. But why should taxpayers continue to give money to a university that has an endowment of over $53 billion? It just doesn't make any sense, Larry. So the president's looking at their 501c3 status, and he wants them to come to the table and change things. I mean, Harvard was such a revered university, but it's not anymore. And what students are we letting in? What kind of background checks are we doing? And what kind of teachers are we letting in? I think about 3% of the faculty is conservative. The rest are not.
I'm surprised it's that good.
Yeah.
So you and the president are reviewing their tax-exempt status.
Yeah, we are. And the president, he even said the other day, hey, why would a university that would hire Bill de Blasio and Lori Lightfoot
Can you imagine?
to do municipal government management?
Can you imagine? Can you? In the middle of this whole discussion, they hired those two?
Yep.
The Professor de Blasio? Yep. Honestly?
So he's just really looking at this very closely because he thinks it's unfair to the American taxpayer to be subsidizing this.
Lori Lightfoot, public leadership. That is funny, though. That really is. How low can Harvard go? Very, very low. We had played earlier Bill Ackman, who is the billionaire who went to Harvard and was one of the leading alumni that went after Harvard for their anti-Semitism. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Harvard over the next decade or so. Will they be able to pull themselves back to be an elite institution, or are they going to be, as Bill Ackman said, basically a political activist group? Because that's what they've become. They're not a place where you have vibrant debate over the issues. They're an institution that has promoted, think about it, the racism of anti-Semitism and the misogyny, the women hatred of the radical transgender movement. It's really amazing how they got to that particular point. When you think about it, how hard you have to work, how racist and misogynist do you have to be? What kind of passion for those horrendous, evil narrative thoughts do you have to be in order to take a place like Harvard and turn it into that kind of filth?
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off because he's under the weather. Hopefully he's back tomorrow morning. You know, when we talk about Harvard, I remember when I used to do, Eric would say it was my figure skating workout, when I used to do my hockey workouts on my ice skates. I met a gentleman who was there who was, he was older. And this goes back 18 years ago. So I think he was probably going on 70, but he'd get up there and he would skate. And he went to Harvard. And we were talking one time, and I can't remember what it was about. And he graduated with a degree in economics from Harvard. And I remember, and this goes back, this had to be the 2007, 2008. And I said, what happened to Harvard? He goes, the hell, I have no idea. He goes, but they're not the school that they once were when I went there. So I'm going to guess he went there probably in the 1950s, maybe early 60s is when he went there. And so it's interesting to see what alumni think. One of them is Bill Ackman. We played this audio cut earlier, but it's our audio cut of the day because it gives a perspective from somebody who went there and just is blown away by what Harvard has become, which is, as he called it, basically a political activist organization promoting anti-Semitism and the misogyny of the radical transgender movement. And he talked about it yesterday on CNBC.
Bill, I'm just wondering, you're an alumnus. What should Harvard do where you'd say, okay, to get back in your good graces, what does the university need to do at this point?
Sure. So the right thing to do, or I should say the wrong thing to do, is receive a letter from the administration and write back saying, we're doing nothing. In fact, we're going to sue you. Okay, that's what Harvard did. What Harvard should have done is should have said, President Trump, you make some good points, right? Taxpayer money coming to Harvard, that's a privilege. It's not a right. And, taxpayer money, going to an institution, the institution cannot have massive amounts of administrative load, waste, bureaucracy, and we're going to eliminate it. We're going to hire Alex Partners, or restructuring firm. We're going to take a 3G, zero-based budgeting approach to our the way we run our administration. Things that are not inefficiency is causing harm, and we're wasting taxpayer money. Mr. President, you're right. Harvard has become, there is not viewpoint diversity at Harvard. Students are self-censoring their remarks in classrooms. Faculty are doing the same because people are afraid to have real conversations. You can't learn. You go to college to be exposed to a broad array of ideas. And I guess maybe I should be looking at Joe. Broad array of ideas, and that's not happening at Harvard. Free speech is not happening at Harvard. So you acknowledge the areas where the president is absolutely correct, and you say, look, we're going to fix those areas. Okay, we want to make a deal, Mr. President. What have we seen from Trump? He asked for the moon, kind of shock and awe. Okay, same thing true for Harvard. That most recent letter, you could argue it's certainly overreaching in some of the elements, but he wants to make a deal. Make a deal with the president. Commit to fix these things, which, by the way, your alumni want you to fix. It's in the best interest of Harvard. And treat shareholder taxpayer money like as a fiduciary, and they're not doing that. And Harvard is not in a good financial position. This is something I think is not well appreciated. They nominally have a $53 billion endowment. I don't believe the carrying values of their endowment. 80% of the assets are invested in real estate, private equity, and venture capital.
So it's not liquid.
It's not liquid, and they're apparently selling a $1 billion slice of their private equity. Watch where that gets priced relative to the carrying value of the portfolio. My guess is it could be 30, 40% below the current carrying value to get a bid. In my business, if I owned a slice of something, I sold a piece of it at a 30, 40% discount, I'd have to remark my entire portfolio. So one, the endowment, in my view, is massively overstated in terms of what it's really worth. The second thing is no one talks about the fact that Harvard now has $8 billion of debt. I read the prospectus for the recent bond issue. So you have $53 billion of overstated assets that are illiquid, and you have $7.9 billion of debt, which you owe. As a donor, do you want to give money to a nonprofit institution, which is going to go into the institution and going to go out the door to pay money interest to bondholders? My experience is nonprofits that borrow money, it doesn't end well. And then you have, what do they rely on for current funding? Money every year from the U.S. government, money every year from donations. Donations, I don't know, I have to believe they're down meaningfully. And tax-exempt status. Another reason that induces people to give money to their university is they get a tax deduction.
Fair or unfair to try to take the tax-exempt status away?
I think it's fair. Again, the Harvard became, over time, a political advocacy organization for one party. When a university goes from being a university to, affecting becoming a political advocacy organization, it doesn't deserve nonprofit status. I mean, and they have to. Harvard should be a place where students go to learn and the best research gets done. It shouldn't be a place that is allowing, pro-terrorist organizations on campus, that only allows, certain kinds of thinking and speech on campus. That's a political advocacy organization. It's not a university. So I don't think we're going to end up there where Harvard loses its tax-exempt status. I want Harvard to succeed. It's been very important to me over time. But really, it got itself to a very bad place. And Alan Garber is a good president, but he's not managing. The mismanagement here is Penny Pritzker. If this were any other kind of corporation, the notion that she's still chairman of Harvard, leading the charge here, and in terms of how Harvard managed everything from COVID. And I know we have to go, but it's an important topic, to endowment management, to waste, to free speech, to who they hired as president of the university. It's time for a change in leadership.
There you go. Bill Ackman, they're the billionaire, and Harvard graduate. You know what I look at the most, because this is what I fear the most, the microcosm of what Harvard became, and that is from an elite institution, elite education institution in the United States and research institution, to an organization that promoted the racism of anti-Semitism and the misogyny of the radical transgender movement. It shows you how you can, no matter what, how easy it is, even in a place like the United States, for these kinds of evil of ideas to take hold and stick. And then when you try to get rid of them, the evil of racism and misogyny is so embedded that they fight every single step of the way and just refuse to give up the evil that they've become. That is, I think it's a great lesson that if it can happen at Harvard, it can happen anywhere. Finally, with the talk of reviving Alcatraz, I started doing some research yesterday, because what a fascinating place. I've never been to the island. I've seen it from the San Francisco shoreline. And I started doing some research yesterday on Alcatraz because I wondered, did everybody, take the boat there every day back and forth? Did they have to do that? Like, you have to get up in the morning? No. Alcatraz guards lived on the island with their families. The prison had housing for staff, including correctional officers, medical personnel, and administrative staff. The staff members and their families resided in government-owned apartments, houses, and cottages. The National Park Service, which now runs Alcatraz, notes that Alcatraz was essentially a small town with a prison at its core, with staff members living on the island with their families. Now, children to go to school of the staff members attended school in San Francisco. They commuted daily by boat. They went back and forth. The kids did. The staff at Alcatraz had their own social club, bowling alley, soda fountain, and a small convenience store. according to the National Park Service. Inside Edition back in 2018 did an episode called The Children Who Once Called Alcatraz Home. For us, it was a big playground. Opened in 1934 and closed in 1963. It was home to the young family of guards who patrolled the prison. And they talk about a guy, Steve Mahoney, who back in 2018 was 60 years old, grew up on Alcatraz. Until he was 6, they lived on the island with his parents and his 2 younger brothers, only leaving when the prison closed in 1963. While his siblings can boast of birth certificates that name Alcatraz Island as their home, it's Mahoney who possesses the most enviable prize, memories of their life on the rock. Because we played baseball, flew kites, rode bicycles. On what had been the parade field, we'd get loaves of bread and feed them to small sharks. For us, it was a big playground. Mahoney's father was one of 70 or so guards who lived on the island during the federal prison era. Guards applying for work on the island moved there with their families if they got the job. Their fathers were quite proud of their work as corrections officers, and their mothers would say that that was a dang good job, especially during the Depression. Alcatraz just had that ring. The kids I met, we all loved it. Hey, you want to get a conversation going? Go anywhere and say, I lived on Alcatraz. Wow. I just wonder what was the average stay. Because I'm sure on the weekends you could take the boat and go someplace, but again, probably in the 1930s, 1940s, a lot of people didn't have cars or whatever. But as you got into the 50s and the 60s, they might have. Just be interesting how long the average guard who had a family would stay there. Really interesting. He's got a book. I may read this book. I find it fascinating. He wrote a book, The Children of Alcatraz, Growing Up on the Rock. Because we didn't hate it. Like people would assume, oh, you must have hated it. He goes, we loved being there. Said most families on the island lived in Building 64 and spent most of their time interacting with each other. In retrospect, the experience was not a whole lot different from people who grew up on a small military base, said another child who grew up there, Chuck Stucker. Wow, just fascinating. Because there was a preschool on the island, a small commissary with milk, butter, and bread, a post office. My dad had the first color TV on the island, and it was a real popular thing for adults. Most evening, you were at someone else's house for dinner, or they were at yours. For the older kids, our school bus was the boat that took us to the mainland. School administrators, they were aware of the fear that we could be held hostage to try and get an inmate off the island. So we had small dog tags, IDs, that had our names and our association with Alcatraz. You wore it on a small metal chain. Other classmates were aware, but not particularly interested in the distinction. While you made friends in the city, your friends at Alcatraz were it. Just fascinating. I may get that book. I'll see if it's still in print. That sounds fascinating. Wow. Living on Alcatraz. I didn't know that. By the way, nobody lives there today. That's how I actually found this. I was looking earlier today. Does anybody live on Alcatraz right now? Like anybody from the National Park Service? They say no one lives there today. So 866-90-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Hopefully Eric's back tomorrow. Out sick today. We're talking about Alcatraz. Looking back at the history, why it closed in '63, because it's on an island, and everything had to be imported back and forth, and all that, and whatever they had for a sewage system back then. It cost 3.5 times. 3.5 times what a normal prison would cost to run. So a new Alcatraz probably would not pass the Doge test. But that was really the big problem. They're putting in right now, the National Park Service, $50 million. It's supposedly, from everything I've read like 3 different sources, it makes a profit for the National Park Service. Will it happen? In all likelihood not, because of the lawsuits that will be filed, especially from San Francisco and California, because it is viewed as again, a National Historic Site also. And so will it happen? In all likelihood not. But really interesting history there.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.